When I first published the book, the publisher in England said, well, you need to take this undermine democracy out of the title because we don't think that's really happening. Of course, the book came out 4 years ago, so obviously we're all a lot wiser now than we were then. But I think, he's definitely undermined democracy in the United States, and one could argue had a great effect on Brexit in the UK. And so the basic problem we're facing right now is there is a large group of people in the United States who live in an alternative reality, mostly fed by Facebook.
Your book was a few years ago, and you say, people are wising up. Perhaps now it's taken them 4 years to wise up. Does that mean it needs more control? We've just heard from a former Facebook CEO in Australia who says it's time now for regulation.
It's long past time for regulation. But I'm not positive some of the regulations being put forward would make that much of a difference. In other words, forcing Facebook to sell Instagram because Facebook is too big is not going to solve this problem. The basic problem is that Facebook in the United States, and I don't know exactly how it is in the UK, has a liability shield called Safe Harbor, which makes it impossible for anyone to sue them for disinformation, libel, propaganda, all the other things.
In the old days, Theodore Roosevelt took a lead in breaking up monopolies. I'm thinking of the railways, I'm thinking of AT&T. This is now big tech are monopolies, aren't they, and need breaking up?
They either need breaking up or they need regulation. One of the things we understand is that your utilities, like your electricity, usually comes to you from a monopoly. But it's a regulated monopoly. It can't raise rates on you without asking the government's permission. It can't deprive you of electricity or water and things like that without some process. And so maybe we have to consider Google a utility, a public utility that is regulated like other public utilities and essentially has to ask permission when it raises rates on advertisers or it changes its privacy policies. So, I mean, I'm just not positive breaking these companies up would make that much of a difference. So what if Facebook sold Instagram? It would still have Facebook, and Facebook is where a great deal of the problem, especially if you think about what's happening with the anti-vaccine movement in the United States, it's just spreading the most absurd nonsense.
In your book, you talk about monopolies, but you also talk about cornering culture as well. Your book argues that big tech has cornered culture. How so?
Well, think about the effect YouTube has on the music business. If I'm a musician and I want to put out a song and I want to get paid for it, I could put it on Spotify and Apple Music and actually get money for it. But that same song will go up on YouTube for free, put there by some user, and I can file a takedown notice to get it taken down, and maybe in a week I will succeed in that. But then it'll go up the next day from some other user. And I can't say to YouTube, you cannot put this music up for free because YouTube says it's not our problem. These companies are just like a cancer on the business. If you look at the way music revenues have fallen, even though music is coming back with streaming, still the gross revenues in the United States are half of what they were in 2000.
I mean, you've worked with some of the biggest names in the music business, and notably Bob Dylan. What impact is what you're saying having on the music industry?
Well, it affects every single musician. You know, I tell a story in my book about Levon Hill, who was the drummer in the band, who made a very good living for many, many years after the band stopped recording because people were buying CDs, and that money continued into the late 90s. But when Napster arrived, his royalty income from recordings just came to a halt, just stopped. And he got throat cancer, and he couldn't perform live, and he didn't have enough money to pay for his medical expenses. It was absurd. This is one of the great musicians of the 1960s and 70s.
So how are you going to force changes there? How are you going to force Silicon Valley to face the music?
You have to remove the safe harbor. If there was no safe harbor, then I could say to YouTube, you cannot put this music up, and it's your responsibility if you do, and I'm going to sue you if you do. And boy, they would change in a heartbeat. That's why they're fighting all the efforts to change these safe harbor laws so fiercely.
Jonathan Taplin, many thanks to you for joining us on The Agenda.
My pleasure. It's been great.